But first, we're going to do some optimization to the enemy. One thing that will happen in your games is that, say, we place the enemy just outside the screen, and I'm going to extend the level a little bit so that the enemy is outside the screen at the start. And if I play, you will see the enemy enters the screen soon enough. In other words, the AI is running, it's moving, even when it's away from the player. This will be problematic if you have a big level and you have lots of enemies moving. This will mess up your level because they will start to move every which way and maybe end in a pit or walk on spikes and die, those kinds of things. You don't control the interactions. Plus, they will be calculating all the time using your game's performances. So one of the best optimizations we can do in our games is to make it so the AI doesn't run when it's too far away from the player. We have a node in Godot built just for that. It's called Visibility Enabler 2D. So select the enemy node in the enemy scene, the root node, press Ctrl A and look for a Visibility Enabler 2D. Create that node and not the Visibility Notifier, Visibility Enabler. This has a small box, as you can see. By default, this is going to pause the animation, freeze the physics bodies, those kinds of things, if the node is outside the view. One thing we can do is activate the physics process parent checkbox so that when the node is outside the view, it stops physics process, and you can add that with process as well. So we can try that by playing the game. The enemy has physics process enabled by default, so it will enter the view. Now, going back to the level template, I'm going to move the tile map with the W key. Let's see if I manage to do that. I'm going to move it to the left, so -200, -400. Okay, I'm just going to make it so the enemy can get outside of the view. So I'm going to put the enemy in view at the start of the game, let it walk to the left, and you'll see it should not come back to the right. Let's start the game, the enemy goes out of the screen, and it never comes back. Because as soon as it got out of the view, our Visibility Enabler 2D stopped physics process on the enemy. And that is something we can control via code, because you saw that if, on the other hand, the enemy starts outside the screen, it will be moving. This Visibility Enabler is only going to trigger when the enemy gets outside the screen. So we're going to go back to the script, the enemy script, and in our ready function, we can call a method called setPhysicsProcess, and we need to pass a Boolean value to it. We need to pass false. This will deactivate the enemy at the start of the game. You will see that the enemy never enters the screen. So now this code is not running until the enemy gets in the view. We want to change the visibility rectangle, the pink rectangle we have on the enemy, which is the box that has to get in or outside the view for the features we have in the visibility enabler to work. So we're going to resize that rectangle by changing the rect property on the node. Let's move it to -80. It's a little too big, so I'm trying to see what the size of the enemy is, because we can't resize it interactively. -50 seems to do the trick. So you have the X and Y position of the origin of the rectangle, and then you have the width and height of the rectangle. So I'm going to go 150, let's say a little more, 60. Okay, to go down to the base of the enemy. So when this pink rectangle enters the view, the enemy will activate. Now it's time to add a camera so we can see our visibility enabler in effect. Well, I'm going to go to the player scene. So you can press Ctrl-Shift-O and start to type player to open it easily. Ctrl-Shift-O is a shortcut to quick open scene. Press enter. And we are going to select the player node, Ctrl-A, and add a camera 2D. Press enter to add it to the player. By default, it's not going to do anything. We have, with the camera selected, to go to the inspector and check the current checkbox to activate it. This current checkbox is interesting. The last camera to set this on is going to be the active camera we see the game through. We only have one in our game, so it's going to be that one attached to the player that we will see the game through, but this gives us a nice camera that will follow the player node. And you can see that as soon as we see the enemy, we move to the enemy, it's going to start moving. And as we get away from it, we don't really see it, but it stops moving. We go away from the enemy, it stops moving. It's outside the view. We go back to the enemy, it moves again. Interesting, right? So this helps with performances in our game. Now, we will improve the camera a bit later so that it doesn't center the character on screen. For now, you can select the camera, press W or click the move tool icon in the toolbar to go to move mode, and shift click to move the camera up on the y-axis so that the player is rather low on the screen for now. This will help us play and test the game a little better.